I think I'd like to start with a flag salute,
That's a good idea.
even if it's not a formal meeting. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. All right, let's go ahead and have some informal public comments. I'm not going to read that whole public comments section, but I would like you to limit it to 3 minutes. Have the public each, so think about what you want to say and get right to the point. So at this time, do we have any public comments? Well, that's a first. Okay. Okay, I'm going to skip Chuck Bell, and we're going to get back to him later. But let's start out with the Sheriff's Department, have him give us his monthly report.
All right, good evening. These are the stats from February 1st through February 28th.
I think you have to talk closer to the mic.
In the Apple Valley County area, calls for service, we had 387 with 45 reports taken. And in the Lucerne Valley area, calls for service were 464 with 45 reports taken. I have nothing else to report.
Anybody have any questions?
No questions?
No major marijuana busts.
Not lately, no. They've been busy hitting the cities, Victorville City, Apple Valley. So hopefully soon we'll get them back out of here.
All right, thank you very much. County Fire. Say again?
I guess I showed up just in time.
You showed up just in time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have any stats for the last 4 weeks, but just in this month alone, Station 8 here has already had 45 calls to service. Everything ranging from TC or car accidents, fires, mostly medical aids. We are starting to get, even though we've had recent rain, we are starting to approach the drier months. And just remind you of make sure you have your defensible space cleared around your homes, especially for those of you that live up here south of the highway. We are issuing burn permits again. We are allowing burning in the county areas. So if you live north of the highway, you can obtain those burn permits at the station for free between the hours of 9 and 5. They're good for a year. CAL FIRE would be your source if you live south of.
Where do we have to go for CAL FIRE?
CAL FIRE right now they're not stationed here, and Apple Valley is the closest station they're at. So
This side of
if you live on this side of 18, then you have to obtain your burn permit from CAL FIRE, and last I heard they're still not allowing burning. I don't know if that's been fixed yet or not.
I can just drive it down to the neighbor's house.
If he lives on that side of Apple Valley, Apple Valley, that side of 18, absolutely. As long as you have a good burn permit and it's a burn day.
I have a question for you. Do you know off the top of your head how many compost pile fires you've had out here in the farmland area in the last couple of weeks or month?
The
Or
last couple of weeks, I couldn't tell you. I can tell you personally, though, in the last year, I've been on 2 or 3 of them.
okay,
And I'm not the only person that's been there. We've
Woody, there's been what, 3 in the last couple?
I'm the one that's been calling them almost every week. I called them today, they never showed up today. I called them 12:01.
No, we did show up, sir.
Pardon me?
We did go out there.
I was there until 2 and no one was there. When
We did go out there and look.
Did you put water on it?
There was no fire.
It doesn't burn. It smolders.
It wasn't smoldering. I didn't see any smoke coming off of any of those piles.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah, if you put water on compost, it's going to heat up. It's going to start steaming.
Is there any chance he didn't have the right directions? I mean, I'm not,
I know the gentleman. I've talked to him numerous times.
Okay.
I know exactly where he's talking about. I know where his home is. I know his concerns.
Okay.
We did show up. We looked at we did check out the piles, and nothing was on fire today.
Okay. If it does not burn, it smolders. And they're out there, that tractor, throwing it in the air and dumping it in that truck.
Uh-huh.
And it's throwing the embers. That place, we caught fire 2 years ago.
I know I was on that fire.
Were you on that fire?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And we
When your grass and everything caught fire and
grass caught fire.
got near the barn and everything right there. Yeah.
The barn.
I remember. I was there.
Yeah, okay. So you realize it's not that we, and then the odor from it is unbearable.
Okay. So when it comes to that, because obviously you've had concerns, we've had other people who've had concerns with it. On our end, as far as here on the station level, we have done everything we can to take care of the things you voiced and the concerns that you have. I can tell you that the last fire that I personally was on, I did personally fill out a cost recovery sheet, which I turn that into my headquarters, and then they send the bill. We had our fire investigator was out there, and he said that he was going to work on talking to the actual owner of the property, owner of the ranch, and that he was going to be considering a fine. As far as code enforcement is concerned, I don't know what is or is not allowed as far as piles and all that kind of stuff. That's up to code enforcement. Ultimately, it is a working ranch, and if he owns that property and it's zoned for agricultural, I mean, you know.
Well, it wouldn't involve you, but there is a myriad of laws regarding the use and storage of compost.
Right.
And also, county environmental health right now is writing a whole new policy regarding biosolids. So that's coming down. So I wouldn't expect you guys to be familiar with that because you just put them out.
We just put them out, and we take care of the immediate emergency mitigation, and then we make those proper notifications. And I can tell you that I personally, on every fire I've been on out there, I have notified code enforcement and I have notified our fire investigators. So we've done everything on our end that we possibly can.
Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, who was the primary contact regarding cost recovery in your department?
Who's the primary contact regarding cost recovery? As far as if you were to receive cost recovery?
If we want to advance the concept of better cost recovery and more fines to help deal with these files, who do we talk to?
Well, fines are different. We don't, on the station level, we don't fine. That's up to prevention.
Who is that?
That'd be county fire prevention.
Is it prevention or the marshal?
It's prevention.
Prevention.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a contact person?
I don't, but if you go to the county fire website, it's all there.
Prevention.
Yes, sir.
All right.
As far as cost recovery, we have policies in place that that if a fire or a car accident or certain things meet certain criteria, we fill out cost recovery and then we send that on, and then it's up to our headquarters to forward that on to the proper people who will be in charge of paying those fines. Not fines, but that cost recovery.
Okay.
So, do you have any more questions I can?
I just, the odors are so bad out there because it's smoldering. And we can't even open our doors up. We left there tonight and it's right in the face, that's the way the wind blows.
Right.
Right from them. And I've got, the swamp cooler on my house, it's coming through my vents, and we're living in that.
Right, and again, if I put water on it, especially if it's not burning, that's just gonna cause a problem.
Well, they picked up today and the steam just came right off of that.
Right,
They're picking it up.
right.
If we could see it smolder, that's why I called you.
Well, it's not, there's a difference between smoldering and steaming. Those compost piles, when they sit there for that long, they generate heat, they create heat, and when they open them up, especially when it was cool this morning and this afternoon, that heat is released in the form of steam because it's a wet heat in there. So it's gonna release steam. Now I can tell you that I know they weren't smoldering, because if they were smoldering when I went out there, they still would have been either smoldering or free burning. Because they don't go out by themselves if they actually are burning.
No, that's why, it doesn't pertain to you in a way, but to my understanding, within so many weeks or so many days, they're supposed to have it out on the fields, or it doesn't do that.
Right, and that is possible, and you're right, I honestly don't know. That's gonna be something for code enforcement. So, but we did go out today. I know we didn't go out immediately, but we had other things that we were engaged in, and as soon as we were available, we did go out there, so.
Okay, let's wrap that up then. Thank you very much. And I don't see anybody from CAL FIRE, I guess. CSA 29.
Hello, everybody. Basically, what's going on right now is we applied for a grant to Mojave Water. We've been doing it annually. So the grant went through for the Russell Park improvements. So we're in the process of, it was for 12,500. So it's putting in new flagpole, new benches, trash cans, landscaping, trees, etc. So the grant went through. We're going to reapply for another one next year for a shade structure, just so we can try to get this facility finished, because it's still kind of in the beginning phases, and it's going to be it's going to take 2, 3, 4 more years probably before it's actually, what I would call done. Aside from that, Pioneer Park, cemetery, we're in the process of fertilizing, finishing up all our pruning and everything, getting all the plants and everything ready for the spring, the bloom. Everything's been going good in that sense. Fireworks are a maybe. They're talking like the county does every year. They're going to try to, hit different sources for, funds. And if we can reach a certain fund balance there, then they will be putting on the 4th of July. But that's always something it's a never for sure. It's always just a matter of, do we get the funds for it or not? Other than that, there's not too much to report unless anybody's got any questions in regards to the facilities.
I've been talking to Frank and Reese too. I try to keep it on their forefront. I know it's not going to happen right away, but a water park for the kids we'd like to have an area set aside for that, for some future grant funding.
There's talks about that, but you're familiar with the California water issues that are going on.
Well, they got one at Mojave Narrows Park. They got one at in Joshua Tree. So we're pushing. It doesn't have to be as big as I don't know if you've ever seen the one at Mojave Narrows. It doesn't have to be that big. For just a couple of things for the kids, and then they'd have to figure out a way to recycle the water, whether you used it for irrigation or.
With this facility, it really does come down to also not only, the upfront cost of putting in a water park for the children is, the cost of running it, which unless they could find some way to keep recurrent funds coming in every year to run them, between your pumps, filters, screens,
I'm still working on Reese and Frank on that, so I'm not giving up.
Yeah, no, and I think it would work if there could be a plan, come up with a plan that would create the additional funding to operate it. At that point, I would say go for it. We'd be more than happy to do it, so.
You bet. Okay, thank you. Any questions for him? Oh, you're off the hook. Thank you. Land Use Committee, we had a meeting, a couple of meetings with Environmental Health Services. Chuck, Richard Selby, myself, and Mark met with regarding the biosolids out here and the compost piles that seem to never go away, and all related things to that. And so it was a great meeting. Chuck's going to spend some time as our guest speaker covering that meeting. So with that, we'll go to, that's right, we had a second meeting where we met with some technicians from the environmental health. They came out took GPS readings, they took pictures, they wrote little reports on every one of the sites. So all I can say is environmental health is concerned about it, and I don't think they really realized the scope of the issue out here until they actually came out and saw it for themselves. So with that, we'll move on to Cemetery Committee. Nothing, okay. All righty. No correspondence. Okay, so let's jump back to Chuck now on the guest speaker, and he is going to go into more detail on a recent meeting with the county EHS department.
Roger pretty much said it.
I didn't mean to.
I can go home. I apologize, my ears are totally plugged, so I can't even hear myself talk hardly, but to put this into sequence, On March 5, Roger, Woody, and I met with Environmental Health here in the office with their supervisors, and we did a drive around. We hit the main points, and they said, oh boy. And what they told us is that they are going to continue with the biosolids ordinance, separate from a mulch and compost ordinance that we asked for. And I don't know how many people were at the Levita meeting when I read pretty much what our proposal was, so I'm not going to read what our proposed ordinance is, but it's still in the works. And the landfills don't accept mulch anymore because of the methane problem. And so state told them, the sources, find another use for it. And now last year, the trash in the mulch was limited to 0.5%. This year, it's 0.05%. And some of the stuff we saw, particularly from last year, was a lot more than 0.5. The code enforcement involvements in question, they're not exactly sure if it's what it's going to be involved in, other than maybe nuisance. The County Department of Ag is probably not involved. You'd think it would be, right? Department of Ag, but they're not. But they will advise on the applications. Of course, then County Fire was at that meeting as well. And I think it was Pratt, I'm not sure, is that his name? Pratt, Matt, something like that. Anyway, he was there, and they talked about the cost recovery and only if there's negligence, and it's hard to prove criminal. And so I think some of us are very happy to hear that they are proceeding with cost recovery, because that's the only way we're going to get these guys to compliance. And there's something in state law, and I don't think even environmental health is too much aware of it, about you got 30 days to spread a pile. Now, Burtec and its supplier, they spread it as it comes in. The piles that are problem out there at Woody's, that's different than Burtec. Some of the trash and some of the stuff that's been spread is a Burtec problem, and they know about it, but not necessarily the piles. So Roger, Woody, Richard, and I, we did a drive around with the technicians that you talked about, and I sent an email down to Diana, and by the way, she's very responsive, Mark. She really has been, Diana, yeah, she's good. She emailed me back this. Today, on Friday, March 8, Environmental Health Services visited 13 sites that alleged improper land application for compostable materials. During the site's visits, EHS took pictures and the GPS coordinates to determine the property owners and zoning for these sites. It's probably all ag zoning, but whatever, rural living. Environmental Health Services is working with Regional Water Control Board, Cal Recycle, and Code Enforcement to determine the next action steps. Other items that Environmental Health is working on: update the biosolids ordinance and develop education flyer and a letter to inform Lucerne Valley residents how to properly apply compostable materials, that's the mulch and the compost, to the land. And then I emailed her back and said, well, what about the ordinance? And she wrote back just before we left and said, our draft ordinance was submitted to County Council, the one that we proposed. They have to coordinate with their other agencies and the Board of Supervisors, and there was a question in there for Mark that she had, so Mark can read that email when he sees it. But Environmental Health Services is not the only one with a jurisdiction. So, which is sort of good, because now I think they're realizing, well, we got piles, we have odor, we have vectors, who's on first, who's on second, and who's going to do what. So, but at least anyway, they have sent our ordinance to County Council, and we got to push for a compost and biosol, or a mulch ordinance, because that's the biggest problem. And then I don't know if Woody wants to tell you the stories he has out there, but most of the violations were out there and out in his area, and the piles. Now Sun's Farm has got piles of stuff. Who knows what it is, years and years and years. It's on code enforcement's list. I don't know what the action is, but now they've been GPSed, so Environmental Health Services has them as one of their 13 sites. So that's where we are.
Doesn't that become a health problem?
Well, yeah,
Can't you call in the health department?
well,
It is.
they are the health department. And
Environmental Health Services.
they are,
They have a big umbrella.
environmental health is a subset of the County Department of Public Health.
Okay.
But, yeah, they're vectors. In the summertime, they're flies, they're odors, and you got fire, and you got wind blowing stuff. And the question is going to be, can we just put this stuff on the ground so that the orchard growers can put their trees in it, or do we have to disc it in? And what happens when it's been on the ground for years? Maybe it's 12 inches to begin with, it might work its way down to 8 inches later, but can that burn and fire? Who knows? Is that the best agronomic way to do it? Or should it be tilled in a little bit and with some left on top? The material's good. If it's good material, it's good for water conservation, and it's good for to reduce sand blow. In fact, we're working with the Mojave Desert AQMD, Air Quality Management District, to deal with Rancho Lucerne that's blowing off. It blew off yesterday, and I sent photos down to the county, and that was after a quarter or half-inch rain we had a week ago. Still blew off. So that mulch might be usable for that area that's now blown out, that continues to blow at a 10-mile-an-hour wind. But then again, if it's coarse, it might hold, but then again, if it dries up, is it going to blow? So do we need to till it in a little bit in order to stabilize the soil? And what's interesting is the county just sent a letter, the county sent a letter to they finally found who owns that Soitec solar project in Newberry Springs that literally blew out 5 or 6 foot high piles of sand, the neighbor across the street downwind. So the county finally sent out a letter, and but the county is beginning to understand that they might have some responsibility for Rancho Lucerne as well, in light of the fact that they're the ones that permitted it. So that's where we are. We got dirt flying, everything's happening.
Is there any questions? Microphone?
I've been hearing you guys talk about this for a long time, and as a former composter myself, where is the original material coming from that's getting dumped up?
Okay, well, what we're getting, and the mulch piles that are the problems, that's not compost. They could be composted if piled up, but they're being spread out. So they're going to eventually sort of compost on the ground a little bit. And that's green waste mulch from landscaping stuff from down the hill, Riverside County, San Bernardino County. It's all the stuff down there. It's coming up in 80,000-pound trucks, yeah, one after another, after another. And so that's where it's coming. Now, the compost is coming from American Organics over in next to the Victor Valley wastewater treatment plant. And then the biosolids are probably coming from either the wastewater treatment plant or nursery products that actually compost biosolids together with mulch. So there are a number of sources, but we know about Burtec. They're doing their very best on the trucks, the timing, the noise, the speeds and stuff like that, getting it spread. It's this other stuff coming up, you don't know when, could be 2 o'clock in the morning. And I think the farmer out there
How's the trash getting into it?
well, trash is getting into it because what they do is they just collect the curbside trash along with the bio waste and they mulch it all together. But now the .05 requirement's going to have to change that. It's looking like it's a little cleaner than it was last year, but it's still stuff in it.
This is the waste of what they cannot sell.
I can't hear a thing, I'm sorry. I'm deaf.
Judge said that's a waste of the stuff they can't sell.
It's the waste of what they can sell.
Yeah, well, but well,
Can't sell it.
That's why all the.
and the landfills can't take it, so,
They can. Landfills deal with methane gas daily.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't hear, I'm all plugged up here.
Microphone out there.
The landfills
Hold on,
deal
stop.
with methane gas on a daily basis. Why can't
They-
they take it?
The state
stop.
told the landfills they cannot accept green waste mulch
Okay, hold on,
because it
Chuck.
adds to.
Chuck, hold on. Would you repeat that, please, so we could all hear you?
The landfill deals with methane gas on a daily basis. They're equipped for it.
So when did this all of a sudden become a law, they cannot take it?
The state told them not to take it because of the methane gas production over the years, because of this stuff mixes with the trash, and it goes up in the air.
They
and
use it as daily coverage.
Let me finish and I'll get to you. It's probably a worse greenhouse gas than CO2. Now, if every landfill then had a methane recovery that could then utilize it for electricity production, then I would say let's fill them all up with green waste mulch and use it.
Okay, so it's okay for it to release the methane gas out here in Lucerne Valley, but not at a landfill that has the equipment to deal with it?
Once it gets into the soil and even on the top, there's going to be less production of methane gas from it than there would be if it's in a covered landfill that mixes with all of the other stuff. That's where the state's coming in.
Okay. Part of it is that it doesn't act the same when it's spread out a few inches thick than it does when it's in a big mass way down below where it's starting to go through a chemical reaction, where it won't have the same chemical reaction spread out across the ground. So there is a difference. Are there any questions? Any other? Hold on, I'm running back here.
If the state is so concerned about the methane release, why don't they demand that these dumps, these waste recycling places, recycle that into electricity instead of dumping solar facilities and all kinds of renewable energy sources in the desert?
Have you been following are you on that list of the PUC stuff on the biomat? The smaller utilities up in Northern California are asking for more permission from the PUC and the Energy Commission to install biomat, in other words, to burn it, right? Edison, PG&E, and SDG&E, they don't want it. They want out of it, and it would be a whole lot more efficient to get that stuff and burn it in a controlled environment for electricity production than it is to have a fire go through the forest and all this choke stuff that needs to be taken out. But you're dealing with the state of California, John, you know that.
Did somebody over here have a question? Was that you?
Question. If these places are zoned agriculture, what exactly are they growing other than a nuisance?
Well, some of them are, well, the one out on jujubes and Korean plums are the major tree crops coming in, and they're the ones that are planting them up on Rabbit Springs and potentially out on Camp Rock Road and out on Fairlane.
And generally, we're totally in favor of the orchards because it's going to help our valley. They don't use near the water that alfalfa used to use, alfalfa does, and so with alfalfa production pretty much gone away except for just less than a half a dozen farms. It's nice to see other agriculture come in.
Okay. My question is basically all the information I've been able to find on jujube trees is they're supposed to thrive in this natural area. They don't need any kind of biosolids, any kind of fertilizer or anything else. I think it's a bunch of, I think it's a line of, what they're pouring out. Basically, if they're saying that they need it for the jujube trees, because jujube trees, unless they've changed everything, they're supposed to thrive in dry areas that, Lucerne has.
They need about 2.1 or 2.2 acre feet per acre of water in a mature orchard. It's drip irrigation, and if they didn't put something on top of it, when they scrape it off for the fields, you'd probably rather be downstream from a bunch of biosolids spread out than the flying dirt that you're going to get. And so this does help to hold the soil, and it is water conservation.
You know, the ones, when we looked at some of the people that were doing it right with what's the word I'm looking for, the green waste, that's been chopped up and everything, that looked like a pretty good plan to me.
And the jujubes are excellent.
Yeah, and they'll go, so they scrape a hole away and plant it in there, and it'll hold the dust down and hold the moisture, whatever little moisture we get, that'll hold it. But the main thing is getting the dust out of there. So, because they have to scrape, basically, scrape their property down to bare dirt, and that's the worst thing out here. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question to fire. We have methane gas under this stuff. On the site that's on Rabbit Springs and Dallas Road, they have it piled up thicker than I've seen in most areas. And the flash point for methane gas is 307 degrees Fahrenheit. So think about the sun beating on that stuff. There's methane gas under it. That's just all I'm kind of concerned about. I've been really worried about it by my place.
That's not going to be a concern, no, at all. Don't let it.
Well, one time I got in trouble by my dad when I mowed the lawn and threw the clippings in the trash can, and he opened it up and it was smoldering. And I'm just concerned about this kind of thing happening.
Yeah, I can appreciate you being concerned about it, but I can tell you right now with it, when it's that spread out in an open area like this, yeah, I know, but it's still out in the open. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not going to be a major concern. I wouldn't worry about it.
So it's okay for this to be done, because that property is residential? So that's all okay? That's not ag property, it's residential.
Okay, again, that's going to be code enforcement, all that kind of stuff. But just off the top of my head, if it's somebody that's doing it for their own personal, it sounds to me like this is mostly for a water conservation thing. It's going to keep the moisture underneath in the soil. They're going to use less water, and the water's going to last longer. Is that correct?
That's pretty much correct, yeah.
That's one of the reasons, yeah.
Okay. So if that's the case, then I mean, I'm not a code enforcement person. I don't know the laws, but I mean, if it's private property.
Well, a couple of things. I live on this side of town on an incline. So when the wind blows, I can see that part of town quite clearly. And I want to tell you, it's not just dust in the air. It's black stuff coming off of those piles. And who knows what is in that black stuff? Maybe 1,000 times worse than the dust itself. And my other question is, who's paying for this? Who's getting rich off of this? Is it the landowner or the waste dumper?
Landowner gets it for free,
Okay.
and the source cannot take it to the landfill anymore.
So it's a benefit
The
to
state of
them.
California told them, you find another outlet for your product.
So they're making money off of it because they don't have to find a legitimate source to get rid of it all.
Well, yeah, even last year, when they could put it in a landfill, the tipping fees, the cost for them to dump it was so expensive, it was cheaper to bring it up here and spread it.
Dump it on us.
Yeah. So, if you do it right, it's a good product. It depends what it is.
Right.
Biosolids, a little stinky a little bit, but if you put it down real thin, it's good nitrogen, and actually it's better than the chemical fertilizer that you'd otherwise have to apply to get the nitrogen. So, they're pros and cons.
Go ahead.
Did anything come up or change about the analyzing what's in each load, a test?
Well, yeah, you get, Burtech provides lab reports for the farmer, and it'll tell you what's in there. The biosolids have to have a lab report, and that's one thing we're asking for in the ordinance, is that the county be informed by the hauler and the source where this stuff is going, because the guy that gets it, farmer probably can't even speak English.
I'm shocked.
He's not going to tell anybody that he's getting it. So the source and the hauler is the one that's going to have to tell the county, and then provide the ordinance to the person who's getting it. And then the county then will know exactly where it's going, and then the county is going to have to come out, because there ought to be a fee to help county environmental health services, code enforcement or whatever, come and monitor, just like any other project, solar project, whatever. Same thing. That's the only way it's going to solve this problem. It's those piles that have been out there for years and years and years, and burning up, that's the biggest issue. And they were, code enforcement, environmental health they were a bit surprised. And I want to thank that young man right there, Mark, for helping to get those meetings going. We had 2 within 1 week.
Right.
And they're responding to emails.
Yeah.
So thank Diana for us.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a non-action item was, I wanted to kind of open it up as a discussion. I wasn't able to make it, but the DRECP scoping period. Now, there was just a meeting, so maybe somebody would like to take the lead on saying what happened, what their feelings were and all that.
There are two of us, at least, well, several of us were there.
Which one did you go to? Which meeting?
May I go up there and just...
Yeah, please.
There were two meetings. There was the meeting put on by the BLM, and the BLM said, this is in Hesperia, just off the freeway. The BLM said, this is a public scoping meeting, but we are not going to allow any of you to speak. Which didn't really set well with most of us that went. But anyway, they told us what they planned to do, and they said if we want to input to them, it needs to be in writing. That they weren't set up to hear. And then to make things a little more uncomfortable, there were BLM agents with guns strapped on them. It wasn't a real neat feeling. Then, several, not clubs, associations, mostly from the Morongo Basin area, or at least that direction from here, had a meeting following that meeting in a side room, very packed with people. Unfortunately, they said, well, we're not going to have time here because of the time allowed to hear everyone. And they said, just ask us questions and no speeches, please. But I was the first one who raised their hand to ask a question, and there were some other people butted in, and they didn't really get a chance to say much, but I really didn't want to ask questions, and I took pictures of how we're getting buried out here in Lucerne Valley and passed them out, and at least I felt like they got that message. The message is that back in August of 2017, just last year, less than a year ago, when we met with the Board of Supervisors to protect Lucerne Valley, Newberry Springs, the Morongo Basin, any of the desert communities from being overrun. We had worked pretty hard with the departments, the Land Use Services, Planning Department, and the Board of Supervisors to be sure there were protections for rural communities. And at that hearing, we all got to say our piece. And then at the end, a bunch of lawyers from the renewable energy industry complained loudly and said, it's not fair. There's no room for us to build these things. We need to build them in the communities. And so the Board of Supervisors, either because they owed those guys something or because they were more concerned about their concerns than their constituents, dropped the protection for the communities and said, well, this will have to be reviewed at a later time, and they passed the rest of the renewable energy conservation element, which does nothing for us. And that was 7 months ago. So Pat here from the Morongo Basin and several others from there and some of us from here decided to start hounding them and asking them why, when, and where. When are you going to do this? And so we went this Tuesday, a couple of days ago, to Hesperia, and we plan to go again next Tuesday. They have 2 Board of Supervisors meetings a month. They're usually spread out. This time they're not. And so anyone who would like to go and needs to be brought up to date on it, please contact me. You know I'm at the store. And we'd sure like you to come and support us. So our goal is, I didn't tell the important part. There were 10 square miles already applications accepted by the county at that point. Now in that 7 months, it has grown to 20 square miles of project applications accepted. That doesn't mean they've been approved, but accepted by the county to be dealt with. And that's what's got us riled up. There's zero protection at this point, and we feel like we've been thrown under the bus.
Thank you, Bill.
Did they say anything? Did the board of supervisors say anything to you?
Pat needs to speak.
Pat's turn.
She says things better than I do.
The question was, did the Board of Supervisors say anything? They're prevented from saying anything because this is during the comment period. They can only talk about issues that are agendized and so they're on the agenda. But I think we are making an impression, and this brings the whole issue of not only solar in the heart of communities, which this is, but also the effects on the air quality and your quality of life, so that if these projects get to the point where they have to be approved, it's not going to be a mystery. You know, it's not something that they never heard of before. So we're going to be active for as long as it takes so that this doesn't come to fruition. I also want to say that I think the Hesperia meeting was the tryout meeting for the 2 meetings. The one in Joshua Tree was much more successful, and it was filmed, and it is on YouTube. And you can watch it, and you can see people who, they came before a microphone, they stated what they needed to state, and it was taken down by a court reporter, so it will be given to the DRECP, to BLM. And can you tell us where we go to look on YouTube? I think I Googled DRECP Joshua Tree meeting or something like that.
That's correct, Pat. Morongo Basin Scoping Committee.
Morongo Basin Scoping Committee?
Scoping.
Okay, Morongo Basin Scoping.
You can pick it up through the one you just mentioned also.
Okay, so
You also can get it on the Morongo Basin Conservation site.
okay, you can get, if you go to mbconservation.org, which is a good location to get background information, you can punch a button, well, not a button, you can punch a thing, this blue, and you'll get it. But I think it turned out really well. Thank you very much down there. So, and next Tuesday we'll be there, unless somehow between now and then we hear that Land Use Services has done its job. What we want the Board of Supervisors to do is to continue to nudge them forcefully until they do the job they are required to do, and what the Board of Supervisors told them to do on the August 7th meeting, and which they have not done.
I have a question, Pat.
Yes.
Can you also get some people to go to meetings of the Planning Commission? Because they have to vote on it first. Couldn't they put pressure on the county staff to get that thing on their agenda?
Well, I don't know that the Planning Commission votes tend to be 4-1. And so I don't know that we would be able to get them mobilized to do this. I don't think so. I think it's those who gave, do you know, Mark? Do you have a feeling for that?
As far as,
Would we go to a Planning Commission meeting and say it's time for you to get this from the Board of Supervisors?
no, the direction has to come from the supervisors themselves.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So,
Okay, just wondering.
but that was the second meeting that we did this at. And I thought that everybody was very articulate. There was a number of people from Newberry Springs who came to talk. And I think that's it. Am I leaving anything out?
I'd just like to add one thing, Pat. Once it does go to and I'm confident eventually go to the Planning Commission, that we have requested that the Planning Commission be video conferenced. There is a history in controversial items that they will do that, and so we're going to push towards getting that, so you can either go to the Hesperia office or the Joshua Tree. I don't know if they'll be taking comments. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's up to the prerogative of the actual chair of the Planning Commission. But we're going to try to get it video conferencing when that's done. Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, Pat and I attended, so did Lori, a Mojave Water Agency committee meeting in which the staff put together a PowerPoint of all of the solar projects, both on state land, BLM land, and county, within the boundaries of the Mojave Water Agency. And they're not doing it just to help us out, they're doing it because of the water requirements, of which we told them it could be anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 acre feet of water alone. Just for
I
Lucerne Valley.
think you need to talk to the mic, because, come up to the mic, because we don't want to miss any of this information, and the map that she gave is right over there. We got one to bring up. There's two maps up there, and the one on the right is the map of all of the solar projects, the 39 of them.
But what's really nice about, well, what's really nice about what they did is the color and the locate and everything. So we're going to do the PowerPoint at April 3rd Levita meeting. Okay? And so come to that. But the water requirements just for Lucerne Valley projects alone could be anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 acre feet just to keep the dust down. The only way on Lucerne Dry Lake is covered with projects, BLM as well as county jurisdiction. And the only way that they can keep the dirt down is they gravel it before they even get on it and then do their stuff. Pound those posts in, and that's it, in the gravel. Otherwise, that dust plume is going to go all the way to Morongo. And so, well, yeah, they'll get you first. And then we got to worry about all of the state land projects around Old Woman Springs Ranch that's in the DRECP, which Levita's going to be talking about in our response to the scoping session, that would literally just cover that area with solar projects.
Wouldn't that, they'd have to build new transmission lines, because there's not big enough transmission lines.
That's the issue. There's no transmission out there, so do they really want to build out there? That's why we're trying to meet with both BLM and state lands through our assemblyman and our state senator to get the meeting going so that we can help them come up with an exchange project that puts the state lands in an area where, the state school lands, the state got every so many sections when California was formed, just like the railroad did. Very complicated. But, and those state lands, they need to use for generating revenue for the state teachers fund. This is running out of money. So instead of putting them out here in an area where we're going to fight them and they're going to have to do long distance transmission, let's put those in an area where they can be developed. And that's just makes sense, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And that's one of the issues in the DRECP. That's what we don't want the enviros to say, don't touch it. We're going to touch it. We didn't get what we wanted. We protested that damn thing, and Levita did, and so did the county. And all of a sudden, everybody loves it. So we're scratching our head thinking, wait a second, guys, there are things we need to change, and that's what we're going to do. We're trying to, so.
Okay. All righty. Couple of things here. Here's a bunch of complaint forms, well, not form, but if you have a problem with the compostable material bio waste, there's a little sheet here with a number, phone number, who to call in the county environmental health. Take one of these, put it on your refrigerator door with a magnet or something. And so they're right here for, after the meeting, everybody grab one, who wants one. And then also I was going to mention about that map up there, you might want to study that map and see, it's the map on the right, to see what the impact of all the solar projects that are coming in. It's going to change the look of Lucerne Valley permanently. If there's nothing else then, I guess we'll call it a night, and we'll go ahead and adjourn this unofficial meeting. Thank you, everyone. We'll be meeting again next month on April 19th, right here at 5 o'clock.